I've been I'm old. I'm old. I've done it all. So I was a VP at St. John the Baptist, King Edward, in the inner city.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was a VP there for a number of years. And I left that because I realized as much as I love the whole education as a whole, what I didn't love was the management of education. I loved the curiosity of education. That's where and I remember so vividly, it was like March break, and I was watching a documentary about the woman in the States somewhere where she collected paper clips, and they filled a boxcar full of paper clips to represent the Holocaust, and kind of really impactful kind of experience with her students. And they were interviewing her in this documentary, and they said, like, have you ever thought about going into administrative principal or vice principal? And she said, never, because we need curriculum leaders that are just as strong as our building leaders. And I was like, that's what I was missing.
Yeah.
And literally within a month, resigned my VP position and said, this isn't what I want.
Wow. And I don't know if maybe like 10 years from now, I try it for a year and see how it goes. But
it certainly gives you perspective on how all the parts interlock and play together and play off of each other. And it does give that perspective. I did it for 5 years.
Okay.
Which was long. And
that's a good tenure.
Like, okay, I get it. I get what this means. I know how to do it.
Yeah.
I've got like the principal certificate and all the qualifications if I ever want to do it again. Yeah. But I didn't have my fingers in enough curriculum, instruction, and student.
And that to me is like, eventually, if I could see myself in a position like helping teachers be successful, like 20 years down there, that I feel like that would be so fun.
That's thing. That's what I was missing.
Mr. Clark After Dark is brought to you by Luxy. That's Luxy. Luxy is the standard for modern dating, as it gives you a greater understanding of any potential match's intentions and background before you make your move. Swiping endlessly in other dating apps can be exhausting and often leave you with only the leftovers in your dating pool. Luxy is an exclusive platform with just a 10 to 15% acceptance rate, as well as a profile and income verification feature, so you can be confident you're only connecting with those who meet your high standards. The community guidelines emphasize safety, trust, and equality by strictly prohibiting scams, explicit content, and harassment. 2025 is your year to stop settling. With Luxy, there is no luck involved. Just real connections with people who truly match what it is you are looking for. Download the Luxy app today to see if you qualify for a better chance at finding the right person for you. And now, back to the show. I love it. Okay, so first question. Why be a teacher in 2025? Of all the crazy jobs out there, of seeing YouTubers who are 5 years old opening toys on the internet with millions of views, why choose education?
That's like the hardest question. Like, of all the questions that I said I could talk forever about, that you asked, start with the question that I don't even know. I really, in my younger years, had this whole belief system around being a teacher is a calling. You're called to it. It's part of your identity and all of that stuff. And I really believed that for a long time. The older I get, or maybe the more education changes, I don't necessarily know if I believe that as strongly as I used to believe that. I think that the best teachers are the teachers who have passions beyond the classroom as well as passions in the classroom. So, because I think that it takes a lot from you to be a teacher. It's a constant giving and very little return. There are certainly great rewards and returns when students are successful and you're seeing that kind of growth, but you don't always see that, and you don't always see that right away. And so you have to have this sort of sense of, I want to make a difference and I don't care if I see it. And this is bigger than me, and I am this, but I'm also all these other things. So why would someone go into teaching today, in this day and age? I think really, if you enjoy kids, you got to enjoy kids first of all, because otherwise they're going to do stuff that you're not going to like.
Yes.
You're going to be out
every day.
You gotta look at them in a way that you're like,
you gotta be very deflective. Yeah.
You gotta still have a little bit of that faith in students and kids. But I think really from what I would say, the biggest driver to going into education today is if you have this intellectual curiosity about the world. You want to try and figure stuff out, there's no better place to be than in a classroom where sometimes what you think you know, and sometimes what you think you don't know.
Yeah.
And you're constantly trying to like look at it as a challenge to try and wrap your mind around.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the best way to kind of approach teaching today. So if you are like the kind of person who is like, you know what, I just like to learn stuff and figure things out and share that with other people, then I think that's kind of the best.
Yeah, because my favorite part, especially like being a classroom teacher in a high school, like there are many adults. Like they're by no means, I mean, I'm still kind of a mini adult. That's fine. Honestly, I don't think that ever goes away. I think once you hit 20, that's kind of you forever. That's kind of your head, not like in every way, but my thing would be if you're listening to a podcast or you hear something, you're like, oh, I can just talk about this tomorrow. And that's like part of my job is to like be inspired and talk about these things. And I'm like, why would you not want to do that? Yeah, you got to mark essays and stuff. But like, to me, that part was also not that bad to me. It takes time, and we'll get to the essay help here in a little bit. But
yeah, it's just this like, I have all these things running around inside my head and I want to get them out. And what better group of people to get them out with than people who've never heard some of the stuff before?
Yeah.
Right? Like there's part of that. Like I always love, I mean, I'm a classic dad joke person.
Oh, yeah.
I love a good bad joke. And kids think they're funny because they've never heard them before. Whereas I say them to like my husband and he's like, my God.
I heard that 6 times today.
Right. And so like there's still this kind of wonder and even in high school, you know, sometimes they say, oh, in high school kids are more cynical. No, there's still fascination.
Like a playfulness.
Yeah. Yes. And I am excited and energized by ideas.
Yeah, because I even noticed sometimes, I've asked a lot, I haven't really asked it that much recently, but my thing is like, okay, how do you manage your energy cycle?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the kind of, and I don't mean that in like a fortune teller energy way. It's just, when you're up and you have to present for 5 hours a day, like that can be very taxing. And people think like, oh, you're just talking, but no, you're speaking with and presenting to people, which is a very different than just having a conversation. I would notice some mornings I'm like 8:40. I was like, I'm tired. Like maybe I refed last night and didn't get to sleep till midnight. And then it was like the second I started talking, like you get into, you're like, oh, 45 minutes just went by. Like that's, to me, I think if you like getting lost in time, I think education is kind of the place to be. Because I noticed I used to work shift work in the oil sands summer, and like you're looking at the clock every 11 minutes and you're like, oh, that 11 minutes took 3 hours. And to me, that was always the worst way. And I don't think I've ever felt like a day was long. Now, subbing some junior high classes, yes, those days felt long, especially when you don't know the students at all. Those are not fun. And I think subbing's a bad indication of what teaching is like, especially once you maybe kind of pay your dues or find the kind of the coursework that you like to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exploring the kind of intro to education, watch people to be teachers. I know we are now kind of in a bit of a retention crisis. I mean, there's local permit teachers everywhere, which 10 years ago, they said never be a teacher in your life. You'll sub for a decade until now, pretty much, to get a job. Or I don't even like getting a job. Finding a placement, I think the better way. I don't know. It's not really a job. Anyway, to me. How long have you been in education now?
So 27.
27 years. Killing it. Love it.
I have been around.
My
first job, I had just turned 22.
Okay.
Wow. Turned 22 in July and started teaching my first permanent contract in September that year.
It is alarming. Because I was 24 and I got a 2-month placement. And that was like right at the end of the semester. I got 2 months because one of my mentor teachers actually tore her Achilles tendon.
Right.
Like I finished.
Were you involved in tearing of the Achilles?
No, I promise I did not plot any pickleball scenarios. I was playing pickleball. This is like before it was kind of cool. I went for spring break, having finished my semester, and then got a text from the principal, and they were like, "Do you want a job?" I was like, "What?"
Hey, let's try this.
Yeah, well, and it was hilarious. I had to wait like the 2-week window to see if anyone else would apply for it.
Right.
And he's like, I can't tell you that you got the job, but I can tell you that you're the only person who applied. I was like, fair enough. I was like, sounds good. And so anyway, I got into that way. But year 1 through 27, I can only imagine the stories and learnings that you've had over the past 27 years. But again, you're a literacy lead in a very large district. I mean, you're not necessarily like Toronto school board size, but it's not a small district by any means. And I guess even like, I don't really necessarily see like vice principal or district positions, or even now that you've left the ivory tower and came out into the world, as like positions of power. I don't know. Some people might view it through that lens, but I see it as like leading. I don't know. Power is not the word I like to use, or the way I consider it. But I guess, so one of my questions was, like, every educator dreams of the moment they get into a position of power of some sort and hopefully change the system for the better.
Right.
We all have that vision, and then it dies. But I was kidding. And then, so it's like, I guess, like, what is your maybe educational mission, like educational philosophy? I guess, like, what is it you were trying to not even accomplish, but like steer the ship toward?
Yeah. Sometimes that changes day by day. Yeah. Get an email and I go, oh man, I have not thought about this. I guess I need to do some work here. I think for me, as far as when it comes to literacy, what I want is to convey this message that literacy is a basic human right, and that literacy is the root of advocacy. And that's advocacy for others, but also advocacy for yourself. And so when we have students who are not meeting with success in reading, writing, speaking, listening, viewing, any of the literacy skills, then we have an individual who's at risk in our society of being taken advantage of not living up to what their quote unquote best life could be. And so I think for me, it's that constant push of, we're not doing this so that we have a whole society full of people who can recite a monologue from a Shakespearean play. We're doing this so that we have people who can read something or watch something and go, you know what, that's not right. And this is why that's not right. And this is what I'm going to do about it. And that's, to me, the heart of literacy. And so when I'm talking literacy, I hope that I'm always kind of like keeping that advocacy piece in mind when it comes to like, why do we do what we're doing?
And so why and when did the literacy bug bite you? When was the moment where, like, was there a time where you're like, you know what, like, I'll pursue humanities maybe, and like I'll teach English or social, then one kind of takes you away?
So interestingly, my first degree is in history. So I have a history degree with a specialty in the Normandy invasion, actually. I like really dug down in deep in the Normandy invasion.
I've never heard of this like that, actually. Okay.
I needed to know everything.
Normandy, man, it's crazy. Just should have been there.
Everything. Like, I wanted to know the name of every beach and how many, everything. So I had that. I have a guidance degree. I was a guidance counselor. Okay. So I went there. I did music. I was a technology specialist for the district for a while. I've been vice principal. Don't tell anyone. I teach French.
Oh.
I speak French, and I have taught French.
Wow.
I've taught French immersion.
Okay. Interesting.
I did as many things as I possibly could do, but always, no matter what I did, literacy always kind of came back to it, right?
Okay.
Like when I think about when I was doing guidance counseling, for me, guidance counseling was about relationships, and relationships is about communication, and literacy is communication. When I taught humanities, or when I was studying humanities, it's about having a critical understanding of who we are as humans, why we do what we do, and impacts of what that is. And so that's reading the world.
I like that.
So everything came back to literacy being at the heart. But even if we take that kind of intellectual lens out of it, I was obsessed with books from the time I could hold a book. Books have always been my life. There has never been a time when I haven't been a reader or a writer.
I know my shout out Seth MacFarlane, if you're listening. Mm-hmm. He's the teacher at my old school, and I remember, like, I think about, like, you hear like 10 books a year challenge, and I think I have a hard time. I think it's some weird internal push to need to be productive in some way, like reading for enjoyment to me. Like I would always read, not the Normandy invasion, but like history books of some sort, because I'm like, oh, this will make me a better teacher in the classroom. Like it was never like reading to enjoy, which I noticed was still even a struggle for me in some sense of like I'm always trying to gain and rather than just be
Right.
with it, which I don't think is that's not the way that you should approach reading, and that's something I think. Anyway, I'm probably not the only one who's in that boat. Books you can read. Remember where I was going?
I did 10 books in.
Oh, okay. So when my friend Steph McFarland, 10 books in January is great. So that's what she said. She read like a book a week.
Right. Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's crazy. Like I've only ever read like nonfiction books. I guess. So you read like how many books a year do you think that you read?
I guess last year I was 93 at 93 last year. So I did 10 in January.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll
do you
just
have...
we're around and that's a typical number for me, except when my kids were like toddler age.
Okay, yes. Okay.
Clearly dropped.
And so I don't mean to pull you into another tangent here, but one book for anyone to read, what would it be?
Oh, that's like the impossible question.
Yeah.
It depends.
Maybe a handful, I guess. Like
maybe get out of it.
Okay. To gain, maybe like what's the best nonfiction book that you've read? And I guess nonfiction, I almost feel like I go into it expecting the same person to read it to me, even though they're different authors. If that makes sense. Like I kind of read it with the same voice.
Yeah.
Like I kind of picture it as no matter what book I read, it's like 47-year-old man likely reading it to me on the other end for whatever reason. I don't know why. That's like in my mind. I guess the way that I hear the voice when I read it, like in my own thoughts. Again, I'm just laying all my strangeness out to you.
No, I love.
But I guess like, what is it that is there any sort of nonfiction book like that comes to mind right away that someone should or should?
Again, like I'm going to be so evasive in this answer, but what do you want to get out of it? There's so many. I've read so many great nonfiction books. Not typically my genre. I'm a fiction kind of lover and world builder because I've always been living in a different world in my head anyway. But when I think about my anti-racism journey and studying and learning that, like stamped from the beginning is like the quintessential nonfiction text for me. Like I read that, and that was a catalyst for so many other nonfiction books within the same genre, within the same learning profile. But then when I think about like language, cultish, and how we use language to manipulate and how cultish.
Okay.
Just get another one. I don't know if I can say it, where other people can hear it. It's called Word Slut.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's all about the language of women and girls, and especially, women and girls between the ages of like 18 to 25-ish, and how their language is actually, it seems like they don't know what they're talking, but they use they use they use and, they use inflection at the end, but actually it's a power play and we don't realize it. They don't even realize it, but there's a power play to it. And anyway, so like that's my nonfiction that is like, I want to know about words. That's where I'm going. If I want to, the Anthropocene Review by John Green is fascinating. It's funny. It just is like, gives information about things like why air conditioners are set at the temperature that they're set at, like why that's the standard air temp. Like fascinating.
Yeah. He also makes crash course videos.
Right.
In case you didn't know. Yeah. He's a cool guy. So I've heard. I've never played him in my classroom ever, but
never watched them. No. So that's fascinating, and I learned like all these little tidbits of what seemed like useless facts.
Yes.
But keep my brain.
Well, it makes the world interesting. Yeah, 100%.
So I guess, again, like it really depends on what do you want to get out of it? Do I want to learn about words? Do I want to learn about, my position of power in this world? Do I want to learn about weird, strange things like air conditioners and Canadian geese? He does a whole section on Canadian geese. It's hilarious. I love Malcolm Gladwell and his sociology, psychology kind of melding.
I just feel like I would follow that man to the end of the earth. I just feel like he could be completely lying to my face, but his voice just sounds like he's right. So I'm like, sure, Malcolm, let's do it. Whatever.
Go for it. Right. Yeah. Like the revisionist history podcast.
Yes.
Like,
he had one, I think, with Bob LeMay. I don't know if you've,
Yes.
but Bombs Away LeMay. He was like the one that dropped
Mhm.
the bomb over Japan, and that one, I can't even remember like a quote from it, but it just sticks with me. I don't like, and I don't know. I guess that's kind of what I want my future impact to be on my students is
Right.
like they remember nothing I actually said, but they just remember like
Remember the
some part of that course just like
right.
stayed with them,
Right.
hopefully for the better. So I didn't mean to take us on that reading tangent too much there, but that's always the question of, I guess, I've always kind of read for improvement in some sense. And I guess like university almost kind of taught me like I'm reading for a paper or I'm reading to
an external focus.
But I still enjoy reading.
Right.
Like it's like I'm intrinsically motivated to produce extrinsic output from
Right.
reading. I don't know. It's kind of a weird relationship,
Yeah.
I guess, with it. But like even so my wife will read some like fiction books, and I think I'm just like, not that I'm thinking, oh, like don't do that, but I'm like I couldn't do that
Right.
in a weird way. But I still like to read, obviously.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
and so now that I've moved to New Brunswick into this the land of the East, back here from, I'm noticing, and I swear, I promise, not trying to get a B contract and saying these things by any means.
Not that I haven't give, so.
But some things I've noticed, and I know, like, because I was kind of looking through the organizational, like, hierarchy yesterday of, like, as, like, a district subject coordinator, is that kind of, and so there's, like, the director of curriculum and instruction, and then that's kind of on par with director of schools or something. Anyway, that's kind of the way I was looking at it, but the way it was
absolutely
organized. And some of the things I've noticed, this AST role that I'm in, which I think I've loved it so far. I do think that someone maybe who's a bit more passionate about resource would potentially be better in that position. So I do enjoy it, but I just think like I just know someone else would be better or whatever. Anyways, that's just my other thing. But for the AST role, having coaches for subject is like mind blowing to me. That to me has been, and they're just always available on Microsoft Teams whenever you need, all the time, and they come in, plan units and all that stuff. Wild.
I know.
And so I guess in the spirit of educational innovation, so I think being 27 years into it, like I can only imagine the reflections that go on in your mind of just like thinking about how things have gone, where things are going. But I guess off the top of my head, those are kind of two ways that I see the district or New Brunswick doing education differently. And I guess what has been your role, or I guess how have you observed the rollout of that? And like, what have you liked? What have you liked that has changed in your time being in New Brunswick? Maybe not New Brunswick, even if it's just like, I'm kind of thinking about those roles. Mr. Clark After Dark is also brought to you by Jumping Bean Coffee. Jumping Bean Coffee is a premium, fair trade, organic, and low carbon roasted coffee from the East Coast and is based out of Newfoundland. Some of their standout blends include the rich and flavorful Lighthouse Roast, the bold Deepwater Dark Roast, and of course the iconic Screech Rum flavored coffee. Whether you're supporting local, missing the taste of home, or simply looking to experience the best the East Coast has to offer, Jumping Bean Coffee has something for everyone. Click on the link today to secure your bag. And now, back to the show.
I think that kind of at the root of all of it, regardless of how rules have changed over time and what there's always been this whole sense of you're not in it alone, which I think, it speaks to this idea that there's like an AST position, like, okay, classroom teacher, you're not in this alone. There's coaches, like nobody's in this alone. There's people like me. Even with the coaches that are on my team, sometimes we'll be at places and they'll say something like, oh yeah, this is my boss. And I'm like, oh, gross.
Well, that's kind of like the power thing. Like I've never thought of that as like,
right.
Like
I'm just a member of the team.
Even like the word expert, I just feel like everyone can learn from everyone in some way. But I do feel like, yes, I agree with that. Like,
yeah, like so I think there's that kind of feeling. Like I always describe myself in my role as like, I'm just a teacher with a different schedule so that I have more time to read the books to help you do the things you need to do. Like that's really, I've got the time to do the research and to read the books and to plan the lessons and to do those things. But at the heart, that's the only difference between me and a classroom teacher is that I can do that background work for you that you maybe don't have as much time to do because you're dealing with the stuff here. But I'm not an expert. I know things because I have time to know things.
Yes.
That's it. And I don't even know all the things yet. I will.
Well, one day we will know all the things after
all of the things.
93 books a year. Still can't get over that part.
Yeah.
And I guess, is there one of the things I often ponder in my morning coffee ponderings is, I guess, like where is the disagreement in education? In the sense of it's almost part and parcel with our profession that you do not necessarily professionally challenge another teacher in the classroom, nor do I have the desire to. But all I'm saying is, like, two lawyers go into a courtroom, they argue, right? You go to a doctor, you get a doctor, you get a second opinion.
Mm.
So have we figured education out in terms of how it should be organized? Like, is the answer 5 ASTs at every school? Is it one for each subject? Is it double the coaches? Is it smaller districts? I guess, like, where is the room for innovation in like the next 5 to 10 years? And maybe innovation is the wrong word, but I guess like the healthiest structuring of that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm the kind of thinker that can be swayed in so many different directions every time.
I think I'm like, I agree with
I'm like,
you.
fantastic and brilliant. Let's do that and do only that. And then something else comes along. I'm like, and now let's do this too.
Yeah.
I think
This is a Wendy's.
I think one of the places where there certainly is room for growth when it comes to a more innovative systemic structure is, I think that we need more time built into our day, our year, or whatever, so that teachers can do things like pursue time with coaches, time to learn, time to grow. We don't have a system that gives, a classroom teacher the opportunity to do those things efficiently and well. Yeah. We say, hey, come for this one day PL. I'm going to throw as many things at you as possible because this is the only time I'm going to see you this year. And there's a coach available to come and help you with it. Good luck.
Yeah.
And I just think, I think that sometimes it's really easy to say, like, those district people don't get it. Those classroom teachers don't get it. We're always kind of saying, yeah, but you just don't, they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing.
What is it that no one gets? Like, I guess every teacher it's like kind of the classic social media expression. It's like the shared struggle. Yeah, I guess, like, what do you think?
Just think that what we've tried to do, and maybe I'm completely off, but what I feel like we've tried to do is we've tried to take education, and this isn't just New Brunswick, this is like across many areas. Yeah. We've tried to take education and squeeze it into business models as opposed to humanizing it with discourse. We don't have time to talk. We don't have time for teacher A to go next door to see teacher B teach their class and go like, hey, wow, that's really cool. I never thought of doing it that way. We don't have the time for the discourse. And that's because I think like I said, we've tried to like box it into this business model. And I hear it sometimes when I'm in meetings, the students are our customers. They're our clients.
The clientele makes my skin crawl. I don't know why it bothers me so much.
It bothers me.
Like, oh, we need to serve and I feel like even if it was a private school, even using that terminology, it's like, no, it's like there's something different they're trying to get from here, but
it's a dehumanizing.
Yeah, like that's not what we're doing.
It's like
I'm not doing your taxes for you. Like, that's not what we're doing here.
Like a capitalistic transactional relationship with the kids in my class.
Yes.
I do what I do for the kids in my class because I love them. I love them. Yeah. And there's all different kinds of love and all that. Yeah. But ultimately at the heart, I love them. And that's, I've had this big discussion with someone one day at a PL, and the teacher came up to me at the break or something, and she was like, yeah, this has been really great, but I really hate the way you keep calling them kids. They're students. And I'm like, no,
kids.
I love them. To me, calling them kids is my expression of they're my kids. They're mine. I love them. Whereas students feels a little bit removed. There's a different kind of relationship there.
And sorry to interject.
No.
But that's kind of what I've noticed in terms of people who become embittered with the profession. And it almost seems like that's the way the culture of it is moving, is to separate even more, which I don't know. I understand, yes, if my salary doubled tomorrow, I wouldn't be scared. I wouldn't be like, oh, no, like, don't do that. But it's like, one of the questions I asked someone recently was, it's almost like an inherently intrinsic profession. You don't necessarily go into like like, yeah, you hear, oh, pension's good, like,
Right.
you'll have security, stability, blah, blah, blah. But no one's going in it for like that kind of capitalistic notion. So I guess for you, did it ever fade? Like, have you ever gone through like the fluctuations of like,
Yeah.
am I going to sit here and say I've never scrolled through LinkedIn on available jobs? No, I'm not going to say that. But I'm also like, I'm every time I see like, I'm not trying to poop on marketers here, but
Yeah.
I'll see like marketing associate. I'm like, that sounds awful. Something I would
Yeah.
never want to do.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm going to go work in HR. No, yeah, but that to me, I'm just like, that to me, just it sounds like you're giving yourself away
Yeah.
in a sense.
I have never done anything but education related things my entire life, except for twice. Three times. I had a summer job washing transport trucks at my dad's lumber mill where my dad worked once.
Yeah. Awful.
And it was only like once a week because like how often do you wash transport trucks in a mill, right? I had a summer job in high school working in a care facility for the elderly. In the kitchen, cooking.
Awful.
Awful. My aunt worked there and she got me a job.
Nice.
Like that was the only reason I was there. And when I was in university for a period of 2 months, I made some supplemental funds working in a clothing store. But after 2 months, they told me I wasn't doing a very good job. I might want to consider something else. At which point I went and got a job at the library and knocked it out of the park.
Yeah.
So like my whole life, even when I had summer jobs as a student, I ran a literacy program. Like after my first year of university, I ran a science camp.
That's
I've
fun.
always done
Summer camps are
education. I don't know what else I don't know what else I could do. I mean, I have lots of things that I think I could do, but what I find is I think this is, I certainly don't want to give the illusion that I've never had those like ebbs and flows of professional energy.
Yeah.
Because I have. But man, are we lucky in education that it's so different? That when I had them,
it's so different.
Something.
Like I feel you hear people like, oh, I went into business or I went into finance, and like I'm sure the paycheck is nice. Like that's cool. Like if that's what you want to do, like you said, like your husband went into architecture, but then went into teaching. Like I'm sure those are fulfilling in their own right, and I can totally understand not wanting to watch kids sneeze on other kids next to. Like I get that, and it's still something we're working on in our school is covering our noses.
Yeah.
But I get that. But it's so different. It's funny that you say that because I've almost like immediately known. Sometimes I'm walking into schools and been like, I wouldn't want to teach here.
Yeah. Oh, so much. There's a vibe as soon as you walk in buildings.
This is where I'm going to put my fortune teller energy hat on, where I've walked into schools and I'm subbing and I'm like, this is a dangerous place. Not like dangerous in the physical sense.
No, psychological safety. Absolutely.
And like you see the way people like carry themselves and they're like, this does not, I don't feel uplifted coming into this. And then some schools you walk into, and I'm like,
right, this feels good.
We're smiling here.
It's good. Yeah. And I think the key though is in recognizing when you're in one of those energy slumps and being willing to take the risk to make a change. I mean, I've taught everything as low as grade 3 all the way up to grade 12.
Yeah.
And I'm willing to do that. Like I said before, I've done guidance. I've done, I had a small stint in resource. I've taught music. I've taught technology, art, French, history, English, been administrators, and I think that because of our profession is so varied that we have that luxury of like, you know what? I'm feeling a bit of a slump. Maybe it's time for a new school. Maybe it's time for a new grade. Maybe it's time for a new course. And using that to re-energize and stay energized.
And I would say, for the most part, I'd say all the teachers I've spoken to, if you have a healthy relationship with your admin, I think regardless of if you don't have to like them to have a healthy relationship.
Nope, absolutely.
But I think if you're like, I have an idea for a course I want to teach, they'll be like, hell yeah, let's start it tomorrow. Like there's never, like I don't think anyone's necessarily discouraged from, or like, I want to teach my course this way.
Right.
Especially if it's like a course that's like mandatory and a core, they'll be like, yeah, I've never had the experience where I couldn't have done what I wanted to do.
Right.
I've stayed safe in like my approach and been like, something springs to mind. Like when I was in university, that girl was telling me that she was doing like Squid Game stuff with kids.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I'm like, well, what's your curricular outcome? Like, yeah, but I'm like, I'm open-minded, I guess, in trying new things in the classroom, but I also feel this like the devil on the other side being like,
Right.
and like, and I guess that should always still be like what you're trying to do.
Oh yeah, but a really good coach or a coordinator can be like, I'll connect the dots for you because this is cool, right? Yeah, and I think that's part of it. Sometimes maybe you can't change the grade level, you can't change the courses you're teaching, you can't change the school that you're in, but you can change everything in that.
You can change everything you do, which is like
one year I was like found that I was I'm feeling kind of not as energized as I typically was, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to try. I'm going to get rid of all my desks and see what. Get rid of all my desks. And I'm like, I'm going to have no student desks in my classroom. And I had dining room tables and I had standing desks and I had beanbag chairs. And I'm like, let's just see what happens.
And?
I loved it. I loved the kids. Okay. I got rid of my teacher desk. I had no teacher desk. It was fun. And I was like, and it re-energized me because I'm like, let's try something and see what happens. And I don't care if it is a huge failure because I'm actually not a failure.
You have to put the desk back in if you really wanted to.
Right. It's not a big deal, right? But, it got to the point where I had like grade 11 boys coming in. And as soon as they would cross the threshold of my classroom, would take off their shoes and put their slippers on because they were like, no, you don't wear shoes in the house.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay, well, this isn't a house. They're like, this is like a house.
Wow. That's the dream.
Right? And that's just, I was like,
that's the dream. Yeah.
And so I think we have so much freedom at our fingertips to re-energize ourselves if we're willing.
Yes, close.
Right? Like, I mean, we had tables. We had but there were just none of those little white square student desks. The custodian's face when I said, can you get rid of all of these?
Wow. That's cool. And so that's part one. That's one of your other parts for educational innovation. Another one is, we briefly discussed this at when I set foot into the ivory tower recently, and you're talking about joy as a skill. Tell me more. Joy. So I love Gholdy Muhammad and all of the work of Gholdy Muhammad, so cultivating genius and cultivating joy. This idea that there's joy to be found in seeing yourself. So not just for teachers, but also for students, like the joy of reading a book and going, there's joy there. And I think that we have a skewed view of what joy and happiness means. It's not this ecstatic, like running through the streets, screaming in excitement. Right. That's not actually what it is. But joy is more of like this settled contentment. So I'm a big follower of rabbit hole trails. Like the joke around the right? Like the joke around the office is that I don't go down rabbit holes. I dig my own. So I'm like, okay. So, I really wanted to explore this for no reason other than I'm just curious. Yeah. And there's a whole school of psychological thought that says true happiness, what really is happiness or joy, actually comes from an inquiring mind. When your mind is active and busy, that's where you find happiness. Tell my wife that. And I'm like, what a great way to frame that, especially for students when we think about mental health crisis with our youth today. But I think what's happening is that they've got this idealized version of what happiness is and what joy is, instead of this joy is like this calm, gentle inquiry. Yeah. Does that make any sense? Absolutely. Okay. I guess the times I feel the most joy is actually when I'm the most calm. Like I think about one of my self-inflicted walking jokes, not running jokes, is about walking. I would post all year last year when I still lived in Fort McMurray, there was a little canal area down maybe a 10-minute walk from my house, but I had an old man bench, and it was the old man bench, and I would go and I'd sit there for like 10 minutes,
Right.
and I would just be like, another old man walk. And I feel like it's almost cliche now that like you have your best ideas when you're walking, and you're just like, you're giving yourself permission to just be aimless in a sense. But, like, that to me wasn't watching my favorite team score a goal. Like, that wasn't joy. It was, and I wasn't jumping up and down because something I just won the lottery or something. It's like almost like an everything's gonna be okay moment.
Right. It's smooth.
But you're
it's like
smooth. Yeah, and you're like,
with joy.
yes.
Yes.
Okay. And
it's the pursuit of inquiry, and that's where joy lives.
And it almost lets you figure out what your inquiries are rather than like someone telling you what they should be, which
That's right.
I think that's a cheesy way for the educator and me to just be like, follow your heart and find your joy.
Yeah. But I think to do that, we have to, when we talk about it as a skill, I don't think that that's something that we just know instinctually. I think we have to, with our students, we have to cultivate this idea that the pursuit of the knowledge is more worthy or equally worthy. Well, I say more worthy than the actual knowledge.
Yeah, knowing everything is cool too. I mean,
right? Like, yeah. So like, and I think that's where the skill of joy is. It's removing those barriers and obstacles that prevent them from trying. Right? We talk about how if you fail at something, then your grades might go down, or you might we've put so many barriers to this joy as a smooth pursuit.
Yeah.
I'm going to start using.
Yeah.
But we've put so many barriers in their way that they're terrified to try. There's a hopelessness to it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that we need to teach students it's okay to try it and it not work, because that's just as equally valuable.
Yeah.
Or more.
Was it Tim Ferriss? It's like successful failures. And it's like there's no such thing as, it's like you are succeeding or learning. Like it's never like, I guess like I'm trying to think of what does it mean to actually fail. Like every course you can take again. Every program you can change.
But for some reason we haven't conveyed that.
No.
Enough.
And that was actually my other point of innovation was like this new holistic curriculum. And so I guess to kind of tie both of these in, I feel like the joy is a skill and this kind of holistic curriculum mindset. We've had the conversations at my current school about like, it seems that with the point of the holistic curriculum is to move away from the be-all, end-all summative assessment. Yes. And that seems to be where there's the most resistance to change in education. But it seems like we're saying like F it, we're gonna figure this out, and we're gonna take bumps and bruises as we go, but this is what we're doing here. And now I'm not sure what that looks like at the high school here, because I think it's still grades. I could be wrong here, and again, we can talk about the metrics of measuring learning all day if we wanted to. But I guess even in the creation of the holistic curriculum, I guess how is it different from what the old curriculum used to be? Just like, and I don't mean to dig my own rabbit hole here for you, but I guess the conversation I had is that it doesn't seem to me that parents quite understand that we've collectively changed the intent.
Yeah, I don't, not just parents, I'm not sure students understand, or a lot of teachers have understood that we've collectively changed this intent. And I think it's this concept of process over product. We have been a very product-orientated system for 100 years.
Yeah, well, it's extrinsic like 100% extrinsic.
Right. So it's not about how I got to the point where I wrote this essay. It's about the essay itself. And I think a move within the holistic, it's more about like, what did you do along the way that grew you as a learner? And that's because it's not, I can't put that in my bag and take it home and mark that. Yeah. And so that makes that a lot more difficult to kind of quantify. but it also puts a lot more pressure on your judgment. And I think that at times we certainly live in a world, not just in education, but all, where you have to always justify. Where's your proof? Where's your evidence? How do you know that? Why do you say that? And sometimes when we're moving in a more holistic approach, it's more process over product. How I know that is because I know. And that's scary.
Well, and it is.
Right? And if I say that, then you challenge me, then
well, I think there's still, so like, let's just take a scenario. Let's just say I'm your student and we have the holistic curriculum and I do 0 assessment, but like you gave me a 1. I guess, like, what is it that you, like, there's so much, but I think even as I'm saying it, the process of figuring that out is the conversation with the student and the parent. It's been like, this is what I'm seeing. This is what we want to cultivate. And I think that is actually it's much more hopeful, because parent-teacher interviews have been awful.
Oh, yeah.
And
yeah.
It's always the ones you don't need to talk to because they're involved. But it's always like, this is what they did and they're good. But there's no cheesiness. I feel like you need some cheesiness. I'm like, you know what? I see you. Like, I see what you're doing and I see how you're growing. Everyone feels uncomfortable with that, but that's the part that I think it needs to be more of. Like, I was even reading yesterday. I do read sometimes, but it was someone talking about like what you should say to your boss if you wanted a promotion at work.
Right.
But it was like, I feel like so much of education, almost the point of the article was, you should be going in saying, this is what I can do for you tomorrow, not I deserve a raise based on what I did in the past. Right. But every single like justification for education is what you've done in the past. You haven't actually shown me any sort of ability to grow as an entire person long term in any role, because you've done X, Y, and Z and got like a 95% or whatever your professional level equivalent of certification is.
Yeah. So
hop on board, guys. Just be cool.
Everybody just chill out. Smooth joy. So before I left the classroom, all of that kind of assessing students based on giving them numbers and percentages and all, it felt really gross to me. It felt icky. It
feels so
humanizing.
So I don't mean to cut you off, but it's funny. Like, I posted, occasionally I'll think of something that I think is funny that I laugh at myself. So I'll post on Instagram. If I post it, it's like, when you're on your 19th, damn, that's crazy. But you're a dedicated relationship builder and nothing will stand in your way. Like, that's just, it happens. But one of my students actually commented on it. He's like, but you don't know that they're also doing that to get the grade from you. And like, that was the joke. Like, you're setting up education to be this fake interaction.
Right.
That like, I want to give you a grade, but you're actually just talking to me for something.
Right.
Rather than actually like trying to learn and improve.
Yeah.
Which is weird. So I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. Yeah. No, it's very true. Like, so before I left the classroom, this whole idea of marks, it didn't feel good to me. It felt dehumanizing. It felt like it didn't work for me.
Yeah.
And so I decided that I was going to have an ungraded classroom, much to the consternation of my administration.
Yeah. Well, and that's like how we're taught to teach still. And I'm like, it can feel so like earth shattering to you to not have desks in your classroom.
Right.
Not like, what do you mean I don't have a quiz every Friday? Right. Like, what? This doesn't even make sense.
Yeah. So it was fascinating to watch what the students did. So at the time I was teaching a grade 9, 2 grade 10s, and a grade 11, good chunk.
A good slate.
And really the results were the same across the board. It didn't really matter academic wise or age wise, or where they all kind of came to the same place. Different paths to come to the same place, and the place that they came to was, this feels better. Like, the kids actually liked it. Like, at first they were like, but I need scholarships and I need this and that. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? Universities figure that stuff out all the time.
Yeah.
They really do. So I'm like, no grades. You get no grades until the first report card. You get feedback. We'll have conversations. We'll have observations. You will do things for me and I will give you feedback on them. I'm not putting a mark on anything. I'm not putting a mark in Power School. I am not putting a number on you at all until the first report card. And then at the first report card, you're going to actually put a number on you, not me. And you're going to show me why you've put that number on you. And if you and I are kind of in agreement within know,
You're making them
7
reflect.
points. If we're in 7 points, and then we're good to go. We'll go with the higher of the two. If we're off, we don't.
So you would both kind of plan a grade?
Yeah. I'm like, okay, I got a number in my head. What's your number? And they say their number. I say my number. If we're, and they always had to they filled out a reflection and they said here's my evidence and why I should have this. This is what I did on this project. And this is what I did here. And if we were within 5, 7 points, and I was like, all right, we're good to go. We'll put that mark on the report card. If we weren't in agreement, there wasn't this punitive confrontation. It was, you know what? I don't have the same mark. What did I miss? What did you do that I didn't see? Or what did you not see in yourself that I saw? So there was never a confrontation. It was like, you may have done things that I didn't notice because I'm a human. Yeah. I don't see everything. Yeah. So talk to me about what you saw that I didn't.
I love that.
And really, in every class, there was maybe 1 or 2 that were higher than I would have given them and 1 or 2 that were lower. And that's it.
Because I've had a few in university where you give self-assessments and I'm like, this was a B+. This wasn't an A. I got 4 other courses. I worked hard on this. I probably could have done more. And I've had times when I've given myself an A and ripped apart my partners too. I'm not, not in like a bad way. I just being like,
yeah.
I had this one, it was like a radio presentation project with 3 other people. And one of my, it was the government and politics of Alberta.
Okay.
And that was that course specifically at UC. And we had to do we had to do a radio ad. It was a public service announcement for the election. Right. We had an election during our semester, just so happened. Yeah, people did nothing in my group. And I kind of did my share, and we had a group meeting where we kind of talked about it. Mm-hmm. And they sent me the script an hour before, and I had to fix everything. And the radio place had to fix everything. And anyway, I don't know how, I didn't give them lower than a C, I promise, but I was I actually, and it wasn't from I'm better than them. It's I actually did a lot more on this than they did. And that was, might not be the best way to do it, but that's more my Alberta mindset than it used to be. But
you need to set, there were standards, there were success criteria, and they didn't meet that. It wasn't you giving them a bad grade. It was them not meeting success criteria that was already established for the project.
And it's really not that weird because even now, I don't, I've had evaluations this year, and it's never been you get a B-, Lucas, or you get an A+. Right. It's this is what I saw. This is what you did well. This is where I can see improvement. And that's
right.
Why education is not in the same way.
It does.
But it's not weird that it should be. But everyone's oh my God, if I don't have the 4 tests a week, then what are we doing here?
Right. I mean, I always go, whenever I talk to people about ungrading and what I did with ungrading is, I always tell the story of this one boy in my class who I adored, but man, he was a handful, but I didn't care. I loved him. And had already taught his 3 older brothers. So had mad respect for the mom to have 4 boys that have gone through her house and and just that, they were good kids. They were busy kids, all 4 of them. I remember one of the assignments, they had to read something and then convey the message in some way to demonstrate that they understood the main message of the text, whatever happened to be that they were reading. And I said, whatever way you can convey that is how you can do this assignment. And I remember him saying, and I had taught him the year before too, so I actually had him 2 years in a row. And he's like, you know what, Miss Marshall, I'm going to do spoken word poetry. I'm like, okay, hockey player boy. Not that that's stereotypical, but, I was like, I've never seen anything like that from you before.
Yeah. Sure.
I said, have at it. He's like, I'm going to do it. Okay. And he worked his head to his head down the whole time, wrote this huge spoken word poem. And I said, but you do know it's spoken word poem. So you're going to have to perform this to the class or something. And he's like, I don't mind. He was not scared of people whatsoever. And he's like, I'll perform this to the class. No problem. Absolutely. I said, you pick a day when you think you're going to be ready and I'll create space for that. So he comes, he's gets up and he does his spoken word poem and he gets to the end of it and he looks at me and he goes, that's crap, huh? I said, yeah, that was.
Yeah.
And he's like, whew. Well, I'm just going to go and write a little essay and you'll mark that instead, right? And I'm like, yeah, this was, you were trying something out and it didn't, we now know, not your thing. And he's like, so in fairness, if this had been like another person's classroom and you marked that, what mark would you have given that? And I'm like, I like you, so I would have given you a 60. That.
Yeah.
Like that's only because you're a nice kid. I didn't even like you, obviously not. But he would never have taken that risk.
I think that's one thing, like the risk taking, I find, especially coming from a very standardized, like, again, you can talk about Alberta kind of gets demonized for standardized testing and all that stuff. And I think there is change on the way, et cetera. But just because you're moving away doesn't mean it's good. Because I know like, we've talked about like a huge grade 12 exam as like a general benchmark. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It depends how you do it and I guess how heavy it is, et cetera. But like, the panic of, okay, what do I do to just get my mark up is just such an exhausting conversation to have every day. And no one wants to do anything outside the lines because outside the lines is where the 70, and I guess you're kind of taught to think that way too of how you assess. And so it just becomes very repetitive, which I think is what I'm actually excited for. I think moving into, potentially into a different, like a high school role to kind of revisit social studies from a non-standardized lens, which I think would be interesting. Because even like interactions here as like an outcome, that was never, like you could not show up every single day in my old class and still get like a 90%. If you wrote me the papers and you wrote me the unit test, you were fine. Like, and you did your projects at home, like it almost removes the purpose of the classroom in a big way, which is like, I remember in university too, there was one girl who we had a history seminar course, or not, it was like a third year level course anyway. And I didn't see her the entire semester. There's only like 10 of us in the class. And she showed up on the final exam day and like the look my professor gave her, I can just remember like, and she probably did like decent. If you can like write a good essay, like you probably just did well on it, whatever. But I do like that assessing interaction and taking that as part of the holistic, I guess, sense. It's game changer for what I've seen. And so got on a lot of tangents here, but I know I love a tangent as much as next. Mr. Clark After Dark is also brought to you by Jumping Bean Coffee. Jumping Bean Coffee is a premium, fair trade, organic, and low carbon roasted coffee from the East Coast and is based out of Newfoundland. Some of their standout blends include the rich and flavorful Lighthouse Roast, the bold Deepwater Dark Roast, and of course the iconic Screech Rum flavored coffee. Whether you're supporting local, missing the taste of home, or simply looking to experience the best the East Coast has to offer, Jumping Bean Coffee has something for everyone. Click on the link today to secure your bag. And now, back to the show. For the ever ensuing ChatGPT conversation, and I love a good teacher rumination more than anyone. So I wrote in here that I had a former colleague, John Wong, legend, great guy, but he said to me it was after his class had written an essay, and like we're just going through, like there's just so much this bullshit of like just trying to weed through, like I want you to understand that writing makes you a better thinker, being a better thinker makes you a better speaker, being a better speaker helps you in everything. And like to jump through so many hoops to try to avoid that, I remember he looked at me, he's like, what are we even doing? And it was just this experienced teacher who was just being vulnerable and being lost. And I guess there's likely obviously more ways to think about it. Do we move forward kind of teaching with a calculator? So like, because again, I have a calculator on my phone, but can I do calculus? No, I can't. So there's still things to learn beyond the calculator or what ChatGPT can provide for you, if that's the kind of association or comparison you want to make. But ChatGPT in the English classroom.
Listen,
what are your thoughts? Tell
me. So many thoughts. I mean, I think, when you think about this whole idea of pursuing things I'm curious about, to say absolutely no is like such a door closer for me. I'm like, I don't know. Let's play. Let's play with it and see. I think for me, the biggest thing is intentionality becomes so much more important in the classroom, so that I really am clear on what it is I'm trying to get from students. I'm really clear on what they're trying to give me, and that intentionality is going to be the kind of that crux of like, do they use it, and does it hinder the intentionality of what I wanted to do with it? So, for example, I think about students that I've had in the past who are just, for whatever reason, not idea producers, right? They never can come up with a good idea, and you can throw topics, and they don't have that skill developed for whatever reason. And so if you think about, doing all the different parts of a writing process in whatever way that looks for that student, those students never get to what does good revision look like? They never get to what does good editing look like? They never get to sit down and have a peer conference with someone because they don't have anything to conference on because they never got past that idea creation stage. And I think, but what's my intentionality? Am I trying to see if they can come up with ideas? If it is, then they've got to come up with ideas. But if it is, I want them to have a understanding on how to make this paragraph a better paragraph. Do I care who wrote that paragraph? They use AI in some way, shape, or form to write their paragraph, and then at least have something when they're doing a peer conference, when they're having an interaction with somebody about editing or revision or whatever it happens to be. And so I think that, we need to not always vilify, but look at the opportunities it might give some of our students who maybe don't always have opportunities because there's something that doesn't work for them. And I think the rough becomes much more valuable.
What do you mean?
Like the messiness of learning becomes way more valuable. And if we put more value on that, then the ChatGPT stuff or whatever AI generative stuff, okay, that's nice. I'm glad that you have this lovely little essay about, man, look at this, look at all this messiness of their learning.
Yeah.
And I value this. Oh, that's nice. That's lovely. Thank you. Yeah. This is right. Like that. And I think when we as adults shift what we value, then it's going to make it the draw not as
appealing.
It's just going to be like, I can do that, but she's not going to really care about.
Well, it doesn't become the out anymore.
Right.
Like it doesn't become like, okay,
right.
I can do this to finish the assignment and then we can move on.
Right. So I think that intentionality and the messiness are two really important things that we need to start to value to counteract that, which, you know what, AI aside, I want that more valued anyway. Really, at the end of the day, I want kids to play in the messiness of learning, regardless of whether they use AI at some point or not. I want it to be messy.
And even for like, if I have someone, even for me as like a podcast guest, like I'll prompt ChatGPT and just for ideas. Like I don't I'm not like reading things word for word or like, oh, I'm going to read you this paragraph that they wrote for me. But it's like, but then I'm being not even critical, but like I'm allowing that to be the easing of the burden of initially sprouting the idea and then actually exploring it. Podcasts are for, but I guess that to me is, I think there's so much creative anxiety in everyone. And I feel like education almost makes you that way. Why should it not be a tool to enhance that? And so I guess maybe this isn't even the right question to ask. Like, is there a worst case scenario for what ChatGPT eventually does to the humanities classroom? Like, technically, could it get even worse than it is right now? Like, and if worse is even the right word?
Yeah, I think that really the only worst case scenario is if we have a society who has grown up with AI who don't question. That's the worst case scenario. I don't care who has created the video, the text, the whatever, if you question. And I think that's more important to me.
I just had a moment in my brain of
I saw it happen.
Yeah. I feel like ChatGPT almost makes standardized tests obsolete.
Yeah.
Now that I'm just because the story that I was going to write down, I won't say the student's name, but so for how they did the grades, I taught grade 12 for a few years, and for the preparation in social, I'll just say, like, there was a position paper and a source analysis. Right. Those were the two main essays that they had to write on their diploma. So they got 6 hours to write this. And so we would practice these throughout the semester, write a few of them, and then I would do like exercises trying to like build the skills of like filling it out properly. And I remember like the diploma exam used to be 50%. That's when I was killing it back in the day, or it was killing me. And then, but it was only 30% last year when I taught it. And we used Breda, which I know is starting to be piloted here, but some schools didn't. And some schools that would use, like they would set up Google Classroom accounts. I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble for things or not. I'm sure it'll be fine. But a student said to me, they're like, oh, I actually figured out a way to sneak my phone into my back pocket, go to the bathroom, ChatGPT the prompt, email it to myself, then share it with the email of my Google Classroom exam account and put it on here. I was like, but if you, well, two things. One, if you just remove the incentive to do that, that's not going to happen, which I think it does. And if like, I just don't understand, like, what are we doing?
Yeah, right.
And I remember when we would mark, because I went to Edmonton 4 times to mark these diploma exams, and like it's SPF or E. That's all you're doing. You've got your 4 categories per paper. Like, what was it that one person said to me? They're like, the student is the enemy or something. Like when we sat down, they're like, you don't care about who wrote this. You're looking at paper and you're saying, is this an excellent? Is it a PF? Or is it a satisfactory or a limited? And like, you don't care who wrote it. You care about the product. And I just remember being like, that kind of goes against everything I've ever been taught. I was like, but sure, you're paying me to be here.
Right. Yeah. That's the rule. All right.
But I guess now I'm kind of realizing, like, if we can, but every essay that was excellent pretty much sounded the same. And now if we've kind of manufactured these products to generate the standardized output, what are we actually, it's like asking us to figure out only our mathematics timetables,
right,
and then only test on that when I can use my calculator to do it, which feels weird. But anyways, I don't know where.
No.
So I guess worst case scenario for ChatGPT.
Like I think it's when we use it to the point where we believe it's it is the answer, right? And not have that questioning lens. When I think about what it means to be a good writer makes good writerly decisions. You can't talk about writerly decisions if something else writes it for you. Or maybe you can. But that's where the value should be, is, okay, so you've got this essay. You might have written it. Something else might have written it. I don't know. But talk to me about why you've included this as part of your introduction. I don't care who wrote it. You can't tell me why that's in the introduction. You're not a good writer, right? Or you don't have a good understanding of whatever that concept is. So I think it's not necessarily about the use of the technology as much as it is about the trusting of the technology. And that's where, that it gets dicey, is like, we need to still question the same way that 100 years ago, if someone wrote an essay in a university, I might question whether he stole this from his research assistant. Yeah. Right. That questioning is still important. Just because it's a computer that's doing it doesn't mean it's infallible. Yeah. And so teaching, how do we ask good questions, and how do we unearth the answers to questions that are there, is really important. And I think we cannot spend too much time obsessing about the fact that we're talking about one modality for the most part, and we're privileging print. There are lots and lots and lots of ways that kids can show me that they're a good writer without writing a story. That there's that, that white Western construct of print is privileged. And I think that it's not the only thing. So being able to sit down and have a conversation about story.
Well, I remember we had, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but one of my, for whatever reason, I guess, like, I think everyone has those professors that just live rent free in their minds forever. And again, I hope to be that one day for someone, but like Kent Denhire at U of A, I don't know. I only had him for 5 weeks. Right. And it was like my senior practicum course. Everything I think about like revolves around what happened in that course. But one of the assignments he did was a structured conversation. That was the most daunting. Oh. It was in front of like 5. And so the way it was, your group of 5 people got 5 questions, and you didn't know which one you were going to be answering until you got there. And like, I remember it was on Zoom too. It was online. And I was like, but you need like so much time for that, which I think like what we're talking about, like the way we set up our systems, like if I've got 120 of them, I don't have the half an hour like every day, because then maybe with the AST, like maybe that's something that you can do differently.
Yeah.
But it's like
Exactly.
And yeah, I guess that's something that just sprouted to mind there, talking about like what we're actually trying to.
What are we? Yeah, intentionality.
Well, that actually simulates more of a real life. Like if there's the round table of the districts in crisis, you can't just go back on your ChatGPT essay to like we have a real problem, like right. That's kind of I guess why that sprouted to mind there. But
yeah,
this is another part that I'm noticing in Alberta for ELA, and I never taught ELA. I have an English minor, or whatever. I read my fair share of Shakespeare, and that got me certification.
Right.
But and I do enjoy it. I actually like Shakespeare a lot.
I like it better as an adult than as a child.
I couldn't tell you. I can't remember like Macbeth really. Like I can't really remember like what the plays, but I remember being in grade 12 English and upgrading it after when I went to before university. Long story there. And it was the most fun activity. It was like discussing. I don't know why. Like I think that's when I discovered my inner nerd. I was like, okay, I'm weird. I'm weirder than some of these people. But as far as I know, like Alberta's still like there's a certain set of approved novels per grade. The diploma exam is based on a series of accepted texts for that. So I guess two things. So there was a quote that I saw and it said, students need to read books, entire books. And I would say from what you said, like you've read 93 books. And I'm a book quitter. I don't read them all the way through all the time. It might be for better or worse, but I remember, you know who Ryan Holiday is? Yeah. So he talked about like, he said he's like the writer's supposed to keep you interested to an extent, and he's like if you don't feel hooked to a book, stop. Yeah, so that's why I've been like okay, if I start to feel
10%.
Well,
I always say 10% of the book. If you're not in after 10%, you're not going to be.
And I would say even something I started doing recently is like okay, if I'm 10% in and I'm not liking it, I go look through the index. I'll find like, oh, like I don't know what that is, and I'll go read that part. Right. And that's like I'm still kind of finding pieces I'm interested in, and so I'll finish the quote, and it says, "Our society is distracted, unfocused, and in a hurry. A curriculum that rushes through content perpetuates the anxiety of our time. Reading a book slowly and leisurely is a countercultural act." I know that reader identity and kind of genres, and I'm not sure what it's like at the high school level here, but how would you respond to that?
Absolutely. But I feel like I keep saying the same words over and over again. Intentionality.
Yeah.
What are we telling kids that they're going to get out of their reading? If I'm saying, here's this book, I want you to read it, and at the end, I'm going to ask you to write an essay about it, then why would they be engaged necessarily? Yeah. Like we don't have, to me, that's not but of the 93 books I read last year, not one person asked me to write an essay about any of them.
Yep.
You know why I read those books? Because I wanted to.
Yeah.
Right. I didn't pick them for any purpose other than, some of them I picked because they helped me professionally do something that I needed to do or whatever. Intentionality. And I think we've got our intentions skewed sometimes when it comes to reading books. Yeah. And it goes back to that smooth joy, right? Like it's like, this is a way for you to find the smooth intellectual curiosity, joy, without it being this heavy pressure of, I'm going to do a book report afterwards, or I'm going to have to build a diorama, or whatever it happens to be, right?
My Aztec Play-Doh one just screams into my brain.
It's that intentionality, and we need to find that focus of why are you reading this and helping students find that focus. And that's a muscle. Like you don't just say, well, I gave them a book and they didn't read it. Yeah. Well, no, of course not. The same way that you can give me a pair of running shoes and I'm not going to run anywhere. Like that isn't enough. And I think that
like that. Yeah.
That's my, and then so there's two other things that I see happen when I think about reader identity, especially two things that I've kind of noticed as I dig that rabbit hole and study it and understand it and talk to people about it. And I see that first of all, we have a lot of ELA teachers who are not readers themselves. It's really hard to convey passion for something when you don't think that it has value.
Because you put your email chain, like what I'm reading. And then I've noticed, I'm like, I love that. And like, I've noticed, like, I've always wanted to have it's one thing to have a recommended books list, like in your class, on your wall or whatever, but like, this is what I'm reading today when I go home. What are
Absolutely.
you reading? Not like, and I think the common conversation is like, oh, what are you watching on TV these
Right.
days? Which is, again, whatever. Like, you can't,
Right.
yeah, you don't have to just read all the time.
Always had a list in my classroom. And as I finished a book, I would put the title on my list, and then I would just go into the next book. And it was not even a thing that I started teach. Like, I didn't use it as like, so boys and girls, you will notice that.
Yeah, look at my astute knowledge.
That wasn't what it was for. It was just there. Some of those books, would they be books that kids picked up? No. Like, there were things like, how to parent your children so that you don't yell at them, like things like that on that list. And they knew that. They knew I was a reader, and they knew that I valued it. And sometimes kids would go up to the list and they're like, "Hey, was that any good?"
Yeah.
I'm like, "Yeah, it was great. I got it. Do you want me to bring it in for you?"
Yeah.
Like, it was I almost want to say it was like very informal, very casual.
Yeah.
Because to me, that's where the love of reading lives. It's in that casual, informal, soft.
Well, and I think that when you remove, I'll say, because especially after, I'm not sure if you know, like, short tangent on like what our school is doing, because like Charlene Melton, absolutely legendary coach, she came in, she's awesome, and she came in, she sat with us as a group, and like we each planned a week. And it's one thing, like, you don't necessarily have, it's not necessarily the case that you can always just go watch every other teacher teach. As an AST, it's been awesome,
right,
to be able to go into other people's classrooms and just like observe. I think that, to me, is like, obviously I'm supporting and I'm helping where I can, but you get to be in other classrooms all the time, which is an insane privilege. But I think almost like next best thing, 6-week unit on a theme, and we chose like different mediums to kind of present the content. But like we each kind of like, again, like, you're planning for other people. You're gonna bring, I'm gonna give you my good shit here, like, right? So you're putting like your A game forward, then you're getting everyone's best activity. And the other part I've noticed, again, I'm gonna toot the ASDS horn here, because it's like silent reading is pretty much built into like 10-15 minutes to start of every block. But like not reading entire books. Like, we read the first couple chapters of Hatchet, and then there's we're gonna go into the Hunger Games for like just for a couple days, because it's like a survival and resiliency theme, and so the themes are interesting. But then there's like some teachers who will do they'll read you this first chapter Friday.
I had my first chapter Flashlight Fridays, and we do it with Flashlight.
Oh, okay.
It was exciting.
Oh, I love that.
It was so like,
no, I love it.
Administrators would go by my classroom and just be like, "Oh God, like, they're sitting on the floor, they're wearing slippers, they got flashlights. Like, it's grade 11. Like, I was like, yeah, bring it.
I think that's what you need.
Bring it.
But I've noticed it's like, I'll go into those classrooms and I see other students reading those books. Hey, like, they got hooked, and like they're being exposed to so much more to figure it out. Like, because I think it's like everyone is a reader in some sense, and I like nonfiction books. Like, that's still what I read for like a weird productivity thing.
Right.
It's also what I enjoy.
Right.
Like, I have a strong cup of coffee and I'm getting into the Vietnam War. I'm like, heck yeah! Like, this is a good Saturday morning.
I'm with you on that. Yeah. But that's
Normandy invasion, like whatever you want to do.
That's your reader identity. I think the thing, and especially thinking about like not reading the whole book and reading parts of books, is, and I see this happen and I hear this happening, and I'm like, I'm on the crusade to try and stop this, is this judgment of reading and what's worth reading and what's not worth reading. And sometimes it's so silent that we don't even notice it. Like, we all have the stories of like, oh, the teacher who wouldn't let me read a graphic novel because they said it wasn't real reading. Like, we've heard those, but it's not even as blatant as that sometimes. When we use qualifiers like, oh, well, it was a fluffy read, or it was a beach read, it was a summer read, then we're basically saying it's a lesser than. And what if that person's lesser than is your most? How does that make you feel?
That's true. Like, set them up to not explore.
Right. And I only say this coming from the same place of like, I have, since I was probably grade 6 or 7, I am a huge horror fan.
Okay, I am not. I'm a wimp at heart. It's fine.
The scarier, the better.
I've never read a scary book. Okay, so I've never actually. I'm only. Yeah. Okay, maybe I might.
But for a long time, I was almost ashamed to tell people.
Oh, okay.
Because it felt like, well, you're a literacy
Yeah.
person. You've got a master's in
Person.
right? Like you're like I've got a master's in critical literacy. You should be reading literature, right?
Yeah.
And so there was almost like this shame of like,
Yeah.
this guy's gonna be decapitated in a few minutes. So like and it felt there was like a shame to it.
Yeah. Which I can see like where you were.
Right. Like there was like
that up.
I felt like there was a judgment. Like I would have to explain it. I'm like, oh yeah, but I'm gonna read this next. This is just my break.
That's a thing too. That's like a weird cultural like I'm doing this with my class, but don't worry, I'm gonna mark my essays tonight. You know what I mean? That's almost like baked into every interaction. Of like why?
Right.
Why are we worried about what we're doing?
Right.
In our rooms, like just to ask me a question. You know what I mean? I just don't
Why are we putting value on things? And so I think that when you think about this idea of we want kids to read more books and have this kind of slow, smooth joy of books and learning, and when what they want to read, we judge. Whether we explicitly judge it or we as the collective, we judge it by saying it's like a light read, it's an easy read, it's a beach read.
Sorry, last year I actually saw like a picture of it on Facebook there, but it was like the old Calvin and Hobbes, like 3-book set.
Yes, I love Calvin and Hobbes.
I took it out like last year and I read through. I was like,
bought them for my son over the summer, who's like, he's in grade 7.
Yeah.
And I was like, I have a guy you should meet.
I have
a guy you should meet. You should meet this guy.
Yeah.
And he loved it. But you know what happened? From reading Calvin and Hobbes, my son started saying like, so what's this philosophy stuff?
Okay. Well, there's actually like a lot of big words.
Philosophy. And so I'm like, oh, well, it's like how we think about things. Yeah. And he's like, well, okay, well, like, who is like this guy? And he like wanted to know more about philosophy because he was reading Calvin and Hobbes, who, they're obviously they are philosophers.
I always remember my Montreal Canadiens lamp. Like I would be up to like 3 a.m. I'm like grade 6 and 7 reading this, like it just being so enthralled. And I remember again, like the memory hits, there's a strip where it's him and his parents and they come home and their house has been broken into. And he has a line, he's like, the dad says, this feels like something that would only happen to someone else. Then Calvin says, well, everyone is someone else to someone else. And I'm like, oh my God. That's like, I think of that like probably once a week. I don't know why, but that guy is with me.
But we judge that as not real reading or not rigorous reading and whatever the heck.
My mind is bored and blown.
And it's jumping off point for something else. And so I think I could just worry so much when we're telling kids, you have to read this, or we're all going to read this. Are we making judgment calls? That kid who's sitting in the classroom and the teacher's saying, we're all going to read a separate piece, which, man, like even I can't get through a separate piece. We're all reading a separate piece. And this happened like in a classroom about a year and a half ago now. And I was watching and I'm walking around and I started talking to the kids and I was like, okay, like they're supposed to be doing chapter questions or whatever. And the teacher had me in because they were like, wanted to show me this really great thing that they were doing. And I'm like, going,
yeah,
you don't know me. But I'm like, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, right. And he's like, the kids love it. The kids are loving this book.
Yeah.
Great. So they read some, and then the kids were all doing like their chapter questions. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to talk to some kids. Like, I had to talk to them. So I start talking. I'm like, okay, what do you think of the book? They're like, I don't really like it.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I said, okay. I said, are you a reader? No. I said, you're not a reader? No. I'm like, okay. Well, if you weren't reading this book, what would you be reading? Oh, well, so there's this series that I really love. And then they start telling me about these authors they love, or these series that they love. And I'm like, sweetheart, you're a reader. You're a reader. And so many kids were like, no, I'm not. And I was like, yes, you are.
I feel attacked.
Like,
what? No. But why is that weird? Like, why is that like, what are we afraid of to be like, whatever. I don't read as much as I could.
Right.
I do like I said, I do this kind of stuff, but I'm not like why would you be afraid of being called like is it a nerdy fear? Is that like this weird cultural, like the football player picking on that nerd in high school? Like, still what it is?
Well, I don't even think it's that. Yeah. What I think it is I think that kiddo sits in that chair and goes, my teacher gave me this because my teacher thinks this is what readers do. I don't do that.
Yeah.
Therefore, I am not one. I don't think anyone for those kids who are like, I'm not that were so shocked, like, I'm not a reader.
Yeah.
No one's validated their reading before. So it was genuine.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't like, I don't want to be a reader. It's like, no one has ever called me a reader before because I only read this manga series, or I only, read these.
Dogman's huge. Now, I didn't even know what that was until you go into a middle school,
Right.
and you learn what actually my niece are starting to like Dogman.
And I think that's what it is. It's not that it's that when we present one picture of what a reader is and they don't match that picture, they don't see themselves as readers, and they're not validated for the reading that they do.
And so I'm getting the sense that this is not our last conversation. I'm seeing that we're getting close. I don't want to leave your daughter hanging at dance. So I'll wrap us up with one of my final two quotes. I'll save the other quote for next time.
Okay.
And it's, you're obviously, however you define success, I would say a successful person, you loving what you're doing, no one becomes a literacy lead by accident, but it's, don't let school get in the way of your education. So I guess, what do you think it is that you have done for what you've chosen to follow in your life that has led you to be your own version of what you see as being successful? Start and finish with the deep question.
Yeah, the first question and the last question, the two hardest ones. I think the biggest thing that I've done is I've never been afraid to just like go out and try something. Like I really
not scared.
I'm really not scared. And I say that about a lot of things. I'm like, well, how badly can I mess this up? Probably I'm not going to collapse the system if I take all the desks out of my classroom.
Nothing in this business is fatal.
Nothing.
That's like,
yeah, I always say there's no literacy fire, right? Like there's not. So if I decide tomorrow that I'm going to take the day and read like Kelly Gallagher's new book on background knowledge and prior knowledge. Yeah. I'm curious. Nobody's gonna be harmed by that.
Yeah, no one's gonna peek in and be like, "What are they?"
Yeah, because like, bring it.
Yeah,
right. Like, and I think it's that eternal curiosity and pursuit of curiosity that has led me to be where I am. Like, and I think that's why I've had so many different roles, and I've tried this and I've tried that, because I'm like, hey, why don't I try that for a little while? See what happens.
I think for longevity in any profession, it's kind of like, I think I'm still in my like I said at the beginning, I never see myself again, but in 10 years I'll be a completely different person. So that doesn't really mean anything. It's not even worth thinking about in a sense.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense.
Amy Marshall, part 1. Thank you so much for coming on.
No problem.